Guys, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Franchise Advisory Board, where we bring experts in from around the franchise community, franchisors, and franchise suppliers to help you gain operational wisdom so you can build a brand that's memorable. And I've got with me a friend of mine, Dan Claps, known him for years. And he's the CEO, co-founder of Voda, Voda Cleaning and Restoration. Is it the fastest growing cleaning and restoration franchise now, Dan?
Um, Depends on who you ask. I think from a franchise, at least right now, I would imagine so. But there's a lot of companies, large cleaning companies out there. But from kind of start of franchise to now, I would imagine so.
I can't imagine anyone's gone faster. You guys have had an incredible run. Dan, guys, the reason why I want Dan here, we're going to talk today about balancing owner success and franchise development as you scale quickly because they've grown fast. That's why, as I said that, I was like, I bet he's probably the fastest growing. But Dan's been in the industry for 12 years, but on multiple aspects of franchising, so he really knows the industry well. Dan, before we jump into that topic, do you want to tell everyone a little bit more about you and Voda and what people should know about you before we jump into that topic?
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me. Excited to join your podcast. As you mentioned, we've known each other for a while, and you always enjoy talking. Before we started, we were like, maybe we should have hit the record button before we started because prior to the beginning of this, we were having a great philosophical conversation, which I always love. I'm Dan Claff, CEO of Voda Cleaning and Restoration. I've been in the franchise industry for about 12 years now, which is it feels long and also went fast. Um, Most of my career has been in the franchise industry. And my path to leading Voda, which is a national cleaning and restoration company, is prior was in lead generation. So I got into the franchise industry first as a business broker, and then I co-founded a lead generation company in the franchise space, which really gave me a lot of access to the franchise community and a lot of knowledge as well, because I was always at events and I love to learn. I wish I could tell you I was smart enough that at all those events, I was thinking I'm going to learn all about being a franchisor so I could start one day. It's not the case. For me, it was just I was in the business of working with franchisors like you do. And I found if I sat in the classes that I could talk to more franchisors and generate business, which I want to tie that back later in the conversation. But thankfully, I sat in all those classes. I did learn something. And then I took that knowledge after exiting my previous business to private equity and, took that capital, started this business with our leadership team and the founder and uh, kind of hit the ground running.
Yeah. Yeah, and you guys sure have. And Dan, we'll come back to the leadership team in a minute 'cause I know that's a key part of the success of any really solid brand. But you guys have grown fast. With that always comes headaches and challenges and things you didn't anticipate. Do you mind? Maybe we can start with the tough stuff. Like, what would you say were some of the top challenges you guys have had as you've been trying to scale and really successfully scaling Voda Cleaning and Restoration to what it is today?
Sure. Well, I'll start with, one of the things that I've learned is when you're building a business or achieving a goal, there are different ways of achieving them. There's no straight and narrow path to success. But when we launched Voda, between myself and our leadership team, we had a pretty clear goal on what we wanted to do development wise, operationally, system
Hmm.
wide for a 36-month plan and even further out. And we've eerily hit the plan, which I will admittedly say was more of the stretch plan, but we've hit that plan on the nose for coming up on 36 months in April, almost to the T. Void the same amount of franchises, give or take, as an average every month by design, which has allowed us to have very consistent trainings and onboardings. It's allowed us to grow our team in a very consistent, thought out way. And so, what I always tell people is the word fast is relevant.
Hmm.
One, franchising is not all the same. A lot of people compare franchising as a business model. Yes, it is a business model, but the restoration industry is completely different than the painting industry, and it's a hell of a lot different than the brick and mortar business. And yet they always get compared in the same category. Brick and mortar, very different. Great business, longer time to open, leases, royalties take longer as a franchisor.
Hmm.
And so a lot of times people will look at the two and compare them, and they're not really comparable. Second thing I always like to mention on fast is why I say it's relevant. Um, One of my favorite businesses and places to shop, maybe it's yours too, and it's also Warren Buffett's favorite businesses, is Costco.
Hmm.
And what people don't realize about Costco is Costco started, I think, the second year or third year in business of their beginning, did almost $100 million in revenue. The reason why was because the founder Jim Siegel was a mentee of Saul Price. Saul Price started the Price Club. He was really the mentor to Sam Walton to Jeff Bezos and Howard Schultz, and all these
Hmm.
icons all learned from the Godfather, Saul Price. And his protege, who worked with him for 20 or 30 years, started Costco and brought in a bunch of really smart discount retail executives. And they started from a very clear foundation, and they replicated in a better way, but they replicated a lot of what they learned at the Price Club. And I very much attribute my team and Voda to that kind of similar story, because my team, we all came from a very deep franchising background. Most brands, they launch,
Hmm.
they open, they start franchising. We came from the franchise industry and then launched. And so for us, I do believe Voda's success over 3 years was really more like 10 years in the making, just with all my compadres doing other things before the Avengers, came together.
I love it. Well, I almost pulled together a group called the Franchise Avengers years ago, but I love the metaphor because you really did. I mean, you had people with diverse and strong backgrounds, really top performers in each category, and pulled them together to create the executive team there. And I have zero doubt, knowing all of them, they're like, that's the key to the success, right? The right people. You're going to pay for that experience one way or another. Why not pay for it up front and just bring in the right experts rather than bring in somebody who can figure it out, but then you go through 3 years of struggle before they get to that, or 5 years of struggle before they get to that level of somebody who could have just started with that expertise in house. It's a smart playbook. I'll just say that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about, so yeah, clearly the leadership team, and I was actually going to come back to that point. So maybe we riff on that for a minute. Like, how did you this was deliberate, right? Like you picked people that you knew had experience, but how did you come to the conclusion you wanted to invest in the people first to build the right brand? Because you had your executive team before you had your brand.
Well, some people can build a business without a team. I don't have enough skills for that. So I joke, I have a couple skills that I'm really good at, and that's about it. I'm kind of a one or two trick pony. I know what I am good at, and one of my skills is recruiting the right people, getting them in the bus, and then creating compensation structures and plans where they're motivated. Because you got to have a great vision, you got to have a great culture. But at the end of the day, I'm a big believer that we all, what doesn't have to be monetary, but deep down we work off of incentives. Like this is what drives people.
Hmm.
And so I've always been decent at it. It's a skill that's I've gotten better at, but I've gotten good at recruiting people, knowing what makes them tick, what's going to motivate them, and where they want to go, and then really just creating a platform for them to build a business within a business, if you will. And so for me, it was all about I knew that I needed a COO, someone that could really take the business and get the
Hmm.
trains on time to the right stations. And Zach, our COO and co-founder, had done all of that in franchising and home services.
Hmm.
And what we realized is we shared very similar values. We're similar age. Couldn't be more different in the sense of like he's from Wisconsin, I'm from New York or New Jersey originally. He likes to hunt. I would probably shoot myself in the foot and pull a Dick Cheney if I I went hunting.
Yeah.
Um, but we share so much commonality. And so his skills are the opposite of mine. My skills are the opposite of his. And so that was really the foundation. And then, Steve Miller, our CDO, I really wanted to be able to teach everything I learned about frandev. And he took what I new and took it to another level. And then there was marketing, Christian Betancourt, our CMO. And so the original team, everything kind of centered around ops, marketing, sales, and then whatever the heck I do, vision, strategy,
Uh-huh.
culture. But
Yeah.
obviously, I'm being a little facetious, but it was all about, to me, could we build a company with a bunch of people that really enjoyed each other, that had unique skills like any team, that respected each other, but there was something about building it from the ground up, kind of like a band. Like I wanted to feel like we were in like a band that started from nothing, and now we're at a much larger size, and it's really cool to look to your, side to side. And it's the same guys. We have 100% retention, and obviously the team has grown, and there's men and women, and it's a great company. But those four, kind of first Avengers was probably, when I look back. Sorry to be so long-winded, but when I look back, that's all the memories. It's like that was what was cool. The building the company is like the byproduct of the building with the people you enjoy.
Yeah, I love that. Deliberate executive selection. But now let's talk about what happened next, right? So you guys started building Voda, but there were naturally some challenges as you guys did that. How did having the right executive team make it a lot easier to navigate the challenges that came up?
Well, I think the first one would be the executive team knew the challenges that were coming. Not all of them, but we knew what would come. And so thankfully, we were able to build a lot of processes ahead of that. Uh, but for the ones that we, didn't intend, and there's been plenty, I think it's been the ability to sit in a room and one person weighs in, another one weighs in, a different, thought
Mhm.
processes, and then we come to a consensus. And if it's in ops, it's going to be kind of vetoed by Zach. If it's in, something else, it's going to be, vetoed by, Christian. But at the end of the day, we kind of mostly make the decisions as a company. I'm going through an issue right now I can tell you about, but we anticipated it and now we're working through it. But there's something about knowing what was probably going to come most of the time has been kind of helpful.
Mhm. Yeah, I can only imagine. Well, because at the end of the day, you're only going to perform as well as your brain trust, right? So, making sure you've got the right people in the right seats. But then I love what you said that the department owner gets the right to veto. You might come in and say, "Hey, Chairman, like I've got this great idea, and it can help our operations. And if it doesn't align with the strategy, like you also have to be okay, Mr. Co-founder or boss man, in stepping aside and letting your COO decide what's right for the company in the decision he makes." Yeah. So a little bit of you got to put aside a little hubris too, I guess, if you want that to work properly. Hmm. But tell me about this. So scaling, balancing this whole like frandev thing. You've got a deep background in frandev, right? That's kind of your roots in the industry. Like you guys have done very well growing, but you also have like, what, tell us a little bit about the process. Like when you've got a new brand that's going to a new location, I mean, it's going to launch. What are some of the complexities you guys have had to figure out how to optimize to get them launched ASAP? Talk to us about that launch process because that's a challenge for a lot of these brands that are growing quickly.
Well, it all starts at the launch. And it really those first 6 months are pivotal. And from the time they open, but the time they open, the clock starts from the day they sign a franchise agreement. And so when a franchise owner by us is approved by us and they sign, the first thing, and we're pretty good at it, is we want to see onboarding start immediately, right? Like you sign the agreement, you wire us a check, and the thing I would hate is like you're super responsive and then you're slow. And so the second they sign, we joke that our onboarding process should be even better than the development experience you had. And so onboarding starts right away. And one thing we've learned is we don't want to rush onboarding. Sometimes owners will try to do it faster. In the past, I'll admit, we thought that was fine. They're excited. No, we've looked at the data. That longer specific onboarding is important. It's like trying to cram for exam over a week instead of studying all semester, right? So we really want to be intentional about the length of time that onboarding is. After that, onboarding is virtual mostly until you go to Voda University in person. But some of the things I've seen really become next level is one, Zach, amazing what he does. He then took his onboarding and passed it on to a woman named Jesslyn Johnson, our onboarding manager, and she took it to a new level. And one of the things I really love about what Jesslyn did, amongst many things, is she created a group. There's individual as well, but group onboarding. And there's these groupings of kind of like a pledge class or a sorority. Like
Yeah.
they in a fraternity, they're all working together, individually and together, to get through the training, like the semester. And we'll do group shout outs. Great job, Johnny. You did the first to check off, setting up your LLC or all the many, many things we have to do.
Mhm.
And it creates that camaraderie, it creates that competition, it creates that accountability. And once onboarding is done, they come to Voda University, they train for a week, and then I don't want to say handed off, but they're connected then with their success coach, who's going to be their point of contact post onboarding,
Mhm.
getting them opening leads on and everything else. And honestly, last thing I'll say, training doesn't end at Voda University. Training begins the day you graduate, right? It's now you're in the real world and the actual work starts. Well, I didn't graduate college, but when I was in college, when you got out of college, that's not the end of the work, right? It's the beginning. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of the mindset of once they finish training, the real opening and onboarding starts.
Yeah, no doubt at all. Well, and that's and you guys have because you got kind of custom vehicles, you guys have the wraps, you got marketing, you got like all the logistics, the lead flow, the tools and systems. Like you guys have a lot of moving parts, where some franchises or you mentioned brick and mortar, they've got build outs and site selections and like fortunately you guys don't have to deal with that mess, right? But the complexity of what you have to do with the custom vehicles and all the marketing and things where did you guys stumble a little bit early on, and what have you learned, and how did you make that process tighter and tighter and tighter to the point where it is today, where it's a really well-oiled machine? What were some
Well,
lessons
one,
there?
again, Zach having the background, we had the right, supplier partners from his experience with, truck mounts and trucks. And we actually deliver that truck right to the franchise owner's doorstep, wrapped, upfitted, ready to go. We 1% better every day, always seeking feedback. Every single onboarding we've ever done, every single training we've ever done, every single owner that's gone through it has been provided a survey. We collect a lot of feedback. And trust me, from month one or onboarding one to where it is now, I mean, I can't even begin to tell you, the difference because we just keep getting it better and better. And that never ends. We're going through something right now, which, I'm going to share it because if any of my franchise owners are listening, I hope you hear me. One of the things we do really well is not very exciting for most of you that are listening, but we do through a third party, all their bookkeeping,
Mhm.
standard chart of accounts, reconcile the bank accounts, everything's nice and clean. They get a profit and loss monthly. And that whole process is extremely important, not only for the franchise owner to know their numbers, but for
Mhm.
us to be able to coach them through our reporting and our tools. And we onboard that in the beginning, and it's extremely important. But one of the things we've noticed recently is that sometimes owners will, let's say you got to reconcile your bank account and you need, the bookkeeper needs, your bank statements or a lot of times bank statements. Certain banks you can connect automatically. You go into the bookkeeping. We weren't helping with that.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden you started to see this kind of snowball of people falling behind on bookkeeping is 70%, 30% the owner has to do, whether it's going through the expense query or, sending them bank statements. And I get it. I know what it's like to be busy. That takes 2 seconds, but you got a million other things because you're out there trying to sell and generate revenue. Trust me, forgot to pay a credit card bill in the past, kept just selling and traveling, and I get it. But what we realized is like, how can we in the onboarding create a better system where, they don't have to worry about those items. And that's today. That's a realization literally, Dave, today. And I know
Mhm.
it might sound simple to someone, but you know, there's auto forwarding of statements like credit unions won't let you connect to QuickBooks. These little things that we just keep learning and improving just to try to take one less thing off their plate has been important. And so it's just that's one example of probably 10,000 different things we've learned throughout the 3 years, just in onboarding alone, honestly.
Yeah, well, and I love the transparency. Thanks for sharing that. It does seem small, but it's so big, right? Like how can you possibly get proper royalty reconciliation, proper financial coaching for your franchise owners if the data is not reconciled, right? And or they're going to have to spend 50% of their time doing their own reconciliation, or the bookkeeper won't know what to do with it because he doesn't have the data. Like the system breaks, right? And that's kind of your job, it's Zach's job, everybody's job as a franchisor is to see where are the gears grinding and let's go fix it. And let's realign let's realign things so that it works right. So I love it. That's a great example. Even though it seems small, it's big.
Yeah, and it's like I've seen some owners, they don't want to do the bookkeeping. It's a nominal monthly fee compared to bookkeeping, but it still costs money. And what we've come to realize is like we can't provide you guidance and coaching on your unit economics. Forget the top line. I can see top line easily. That's not what I'm worried about. I want to see the unit economics, the net margin, the gross margin, how much money. It's funny, Dave. I actually started doing something. I take all the P&Ls, I put them in Excel or maybe ChatGPT, one or the other, and I'll take all the P&L's revenue and all the expenses, and then I'll see. In our case, we're still scaling 110 owners, so it's not like a crazy profit. It's actually a loss because they're all, many of them are ramping. And I'll look at it like if I was running Starbucks America. What did we do in revenue, and what did our COGS, and what is our net? And sorry to get so into accounting, but we try to pretend that these are corporate stores in the sense that like if we were making profit from those locations, what would we do? And then obviously it's up to the owners to take the guidance, but that's something. Last thing I'll say on that, I always was focused on unit economics, but I didn't really know what that meant until I really started to think of it from that perspective of let's pretend all this loss or profit system wide is ours. How would we act? And again, you can't do that if you don't have the numbers.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I love this thought process though of thinking about all the franchise owner, their locations as if they were corporate stores. Like how would you manage that business differently? And then putting your wisdom, your insights into it. And I've got to ask, like, so what do you do about it? So you're looking at it and you see the gaps, and you're like, oh, whoa, like that expense category is way out of line, or they're paying way too much for labor here, or top line revenue is down, or marketing expenses too high. Like what do you now do? How do you guys make that actionable when you spot the anomalies that you would fix?
How do you make it actionable? And how do you put the new.
Yeah. Like what do you do? I guess I'm kind of asking the so what factor. So what do you do now with when you're looking at that data and you say, "Oh, wow. Like here's a location that I probably ought to spend some time coaching." Or do you feed that over to Zach and his team or Jesslyn so that they can then get it to a field business coach and then address a potential issue you see in the data? Or how do you guys take action on those insights you're getting?
I think it starts with where's the process broken. So in our case, again, I'm just using like this example of today. Um, we learned that our coaches didn't necessarily have visibility into when people would leave the bookkeeping service because they're obligated for a period of time, and then they're not. We try to not require much as far as supplier partners. We try to persuade less like enforce. Um, but I guess there was a lack of visibility into some locations that left. And I remember the conversation being, hey, listen, if people could find, bookkeeping as good or better or cheaper, as long as everything's standardized and we get the reports on time, I guess that's fine. But we started to dig into it more, and it was like, wait a minute, they didn't leave to go get a different bookkeeper. It was like they're just not paying for bookkeeping, which now this becomes an issue. So I think it starts with education. It starts with looking in the mirror, and then we look toward the system and in compliance. And then obviously as a franchisor, if things get further and further, you may need to use, unfortunately legal remedies if needed. And we really try not to do that. And I hope that a franchise owner, same thing, we try to work together. But what I have learned between a franchise owner and franchisor is there is almost, I'm engaged, I'm not married yet, but I think I understand relationships well. It is the exact same thing as pretty much any other relationship, which is if someone's doing something different than you want and they think you're doing something different than they want, it's most likely just a communication breakdown, and either one or the other party doesn't understand or doesn't agree. And so it's like, how do you work through that? And so just to finish this kind of exercise, those locations not on our reporting, I actually, after our call, I plan to email a few and say, hey, I see you switched. Why? What's going on? And um, see what's broken on our end. Uh, and then you try to adjust from there. My mindset, it's like it's so cheap for this bookkeeping. Well, I don't know. I have been a business owner for many years. Maybe in their lives it's expensive because
Mhm.
what are they comparing it to? So it's like I think the first step is trying to like see things in the mind of the other person and then trying to communicate.
Yeah, no, I love it. Well, and you're true. It's true that even like running a software company, like oftentimes when something we're at odds or something doesn't seem right, having an open conversation about it and being willing to be wrong, it helps. And sometimes I struggle with the latter part because I'm right a lot, but I need to approach it being like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Help me understand what's getting us. Why are we at this point, and why did you make that decision? And but I don't say it like that because you ask somebody why, it kind of triggers something inside of them. So you gotta approach it slightly differently, how and what questions. But that makes a big difference in the way people respond, and you'll usually find it's not as bad as you thought. Or sometimes people make decisions completely ignorantly, not realizing the impact. So franchisor can step in and say, "Oh, well, did you realize that?" Da, 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 da. And then they realize the impact of what they're doing because they don't know. Like a lot of franchisees have never been business owners before, and so that it's important that like I feel like it's always coaching. It's like having kids. Like I feel like I'm always coaching. I got a 22-year-old and 20-year-old and twins now that just turned 18 on Sunday. Like I'm constantly trying to coach them. Like, hey, check this out. You left your dishes over here on the countertop. Let's talk about
Yeah,
why that's
yeah,
annoying. You know, when you're gonna have roommates, they're gonna want to kick you in the butt because that's gonna rot and get stink. Like, you're just always trying to coach them. I feel like that's the role of a
100%.
parent, but a franchisor is a lot kind of like a parent-child relationship. Yeah. So Dan, tell me this. That was a cool example, just like the minor nuance of like a bookkeeping change. What do you guys do? And you've talked about Jesslyn and onboarding. Like, talk to me about the ongoing growth. You've been around long enough. You have some franchisees who are now in a couple they're a couple years in. Like, how have you guys adapted what you're doing to support the franchise owners so that as you know, you got the new ones that onboarding process sounds like it's pretty dialed. But now, how are you developing these franchisees as they continue to develop as business owners now year two, three, four, five? What have you guys learned there?
Yeah. It's interesting. I'll compare it again to a marriage because this is my theory, and it could be wrong. And I'm only going to speak to emerging franchisors because I only have the vast experience in that. But I recently was talking to an early franchise owner that had the mindset early, or started early and a couple of years in and starting to do well. And basically had the mindset of I didn't really get anything from Voda. I'm not really getting much. I'm on my own and it's working, but I didn't really get much. And after years of what not just killing my ego, I eviscerated. I don't have an ego. It doesn't exist. I don't have an ego. I don't get offended anymore. And it wasn't meant to be offensive. Uh, I had this really good analogy, or I thought it was a good analogy, which was, well, I don't agree that you didn't get anything. Here's all the things that we did, and you did. I actually looked. You called this many times, and here's all the things we did, and those were definitely helpful, and the brand, whatever. But if you feel that way today about today, maybe I can understand that. And let's talk through what you need today. Because at the end of the day, if you did or didn't get what you needed, which in his case, he did admit, like, yes, you're right. Those things were super helpful, but they're done. And unfortunately, now or today, and my mindset is if someone's paying for something today, then they want something today. I don't think it's like when you're just charging royalties and you're like, well, I did all these things. Well, we did that in the past. That's why you got a royalty. What are we doing today for you? And I had this realization, which was like, I think for a little period of time, you really needed us. And now maybe right now you don't feel like you do. And then next year, the seesaw flips back, whether it's at this size, the need of additional coaching, the brand that's starting to grow from an SEO perspective, the national accounts we're starting to build. And maybe year two and three, you're saying, wow, I'm getting so much business from national accounts. This is great. And then it might flip again. And like any relationship, every relationship I've ever had, whether it's a lifelong friend or anything else, business, you know what I've learned, Dave? relationships are like a seesaw when it comes to leverage.
Mhm.
I might be in a situation where you have the leverage. Different time. I have the leverage. Now, good relationships is neither of us use that against one another because it'll
Right.
flip. And so that's kind of my mentality. I think that as I work with owners that are longer in the system, I try to say, what do they need now? And if we identify what they need now, we're not going to provide it today. We can't. But what we can do is build it and give them what they need. And so I've seen it change. And I guess my most candid answer is I know what to do to ramp franchise owners. We know what to do in year one and year two. Um, and we have a great idea what to do in year three, but we're learning together too. Um, and I think that's kind of the joy of our early adopters. And this is the last thing I'll say is like early adopters are not early adopters just for the first few years. They're with you for the long term.
Right.
And the ability to get back into listening mode is important. So for us, I think don't get me wrong, I love feedback on ramping. But if I talk to a new owner, we've ramped 110 times. Like I heard this feedback and a lot more. Trust me, do it this way.
Mhm.
Year three, the franchise owner exceeding a certain revenue, we're back in listening mode because 3 years from now, I'm going to start saying that again. I've done this a billion times. This is new for us too. So I think that's my most, transparent answers. We're learning.
Yeah. No, and that has to be the answer. I would hope it is. I had a really cool podcast, boy, about a year ago now, with somebody who they're at a different stage, right? Where they've had multiple people renew a couple of times. They're a 40-year-old brand, but they found that they started providing with their brands that were like 5+ years old, and out of a 10-year agreement, that they would start to provide that they had coaches that were now trained a little bit more skilled on like P&L assessment and true business value growth, and starting to help them figure out like maybe succession planning or years 7 through 10, maybe starting to get into legacy building and but transition planning or getting ready to be sold. So they actually had every year they'll meet with those older franchises, more mature franchises, and they'll give them a valuation. Like, hey, here's a rough evaluation of what your business would be worth if you sold it today based upon your P&L data, and using really basic guidelines out of kind of like SBA, right? What's an SBA gonna approve for your business? And then they said, so we got a couple of options. One, do we want to grow it? Do we want to prep it for sell? Or are you getting ready to transition it, right? So they would have an open dialogue about it, and it shifted the focus of the franchise owners because a lot of times franchise owners, Amy and I bought, grew, sold a franchise really fast. We just sold them about a year ago, but but we knew how to run our P&L so that it had value in it, so that when somebody decided to buy it, it was worth something. But a lot of people that are these business owners, like, oh, paying for my truck, I'm paying for this, I'm sucking every penny out of the P&L, so my net income's zero because I don't want to pay taxes, which is fine your first 5 years. But if you're trying to prep to sell the brand, or you want to go get a business loan to go buy another territory, whoops, like your P&L sucks, man. So like, so they shifted, and the culture shifted, and people that were just kind of floating and not growing, like
Yeah.
they started to think differently about their business of, oh, if I do want to get ready to sell, I got to start acting differently with the business. Let me reinvigorate it or hire a GM to do what I used to do 5 years ago, but I'm tired. I get so yeah, these are things that I'm sure you'll face them elegantly, and your advice to listen, mission critical, man. Like every franchise brand has to listen. Do you know Chris Stewart over at Bloomin' Blinds?
Yeah. Oh,
I,
yeah,
I,
yeah.
he said
So I was
something
mixing
brilliant.
Kelsey Stewart's his brother. I interact with him more. So I was like, that name sounds familiar. But yeah,
Yeah,
Chris and
yeah,
Kelsey. Yeah.
yeah. You know who he is. Yeah, but anyway, he said something super similar where you said like just always listen. And his words were the franchisees are almost always right if you just listen to them. They're not always, and he knows that. But like they're the ones in the field day by day. Like often they're the ones that know. And speaking of which, tell me about FAC. So how are you guys harnessing the headwinds, like or the tailwinds? I mean, of franchisees innovating, growing, developing in this great business model you've built. How do you guys harness that? Have you guys got an FAC or committees or anything like that?
Yeah, we have an FAC. We meet quarterly, although I think we're moving toward every other month.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't necessarily agree, but the FAC thinks we should. And perfect example of we're going to try their suggestion. Um, FAC is very interesting because it's this really nice balance, but you know, um, I think that the franchise advisory council, when done properly, and I think we're still developing ours, is it is important that the franchise advisory council is a conduit of the franchise base. What I've seen in my 12 years in franchising is often the franchise advisory council becomes a silo and they
Yeah.
communicate the 8, 9, 10 people's thoughts. And that really is not the intention of the franchise advisory council. It's supposed to be 8 to 10 people, like a board of advisors, but they're going out and they're, seeking feedback from the rest of the base. And so uh, I think, we're not that our franchise advisory isn't doing that, but I want to do that better. And the other thing I've learned is, and this is recent, is I think as a CEO, what I'm looking to do next is, if I was CEO of a board with a board, I'm going to go talk to my 5 board members before the board meeting, and then I'm going to have a board meeting, and it's going to be more productive. I guess my point is a franchise advisory council is only as good as the way that you run that system. And if you're just like, well, we got a bunch of people, we meet once a month, once a quarter, that's not really going to work. But what I'm really proud of our FAC, and they're awesome, is that they do a great job at organizing the major problems. So what we did, Dave, is a few months back, we went over, tell us your biggest problems, came out to 7, went through them, we listened. We got back on a call. We actually went through, this is what we heard. Here's our belief of how you order these of order of magnitude. What's most important, second important, third. Do we agree? Yes. And then we went back and we built our plan. Came back again. Here's our plan. And for us, that plan was developed in Q4 for Q1, presented to the FAC at late December, presented to the entire system in early January. And now for this quarter, that's it. You have another idea? Throw it on the list. It can't be done until the Q1 kind of goal is done. And really what we did though is out of the 7 things, we picked the top 3. And out of the top 3, you said, which is the biggest one? And then the biggest one is the one we're really focused on. If the others get done, great.
Mhm.
But I would rather see my team and my leaders pick one thing, do it really well for a quarter or even a half a year, than try to do everything at once. And that's the biggest, way to succeed. Now, I'm guilty. I have lots of ideas. Um, we're getting better and better at saying, that's a great idea. Throw it on the Q2 potential rocks. And today I just did my rock update because we've got 20 days left in the quarter. And, you better believe we're going to hit all those rocks or, we'll have issues. But we have to stay focused. And I think the FAC does a great job helping us identify. We might think we know what's broken, or maybe from the franchisor's perspective, there's things we want to fix. That's great. But what do the franchise owners need fixed that actually is going to move the needle for their business? And by the way, not the nice to haves. What's
Yeah.
going to actually make you money? Because that's what matters. At
Mhm.
least right now, while we're in hyper growth.
Oh yeah. No, I appreciate it. Well, you've got to be a staunch pragmatist when it comes to what you focus your energy on. Limited resources, limited. There are 1,000 things that everybody wants you to touch, and only
Yeah.
20 of them are going to help in any way whatsoever. So yeah, you've got to be, and even the same in the software development world. When you were talking about that, I was like, dude, you sound like our sprint planning and our development execution plan. Like, hey, great idea. It goes over there. Like we've already got the plan. You don't get to interrupt the plan. We've got a Q1 plan. And unless it's a hot fix or an emergency, like there's room for that. But otherwise, it goes into Q2 planning. And the discipline around that, probably difficult to create. But once you start it and you make a culture of that, it's going to pay a lot of dividends in the long run. Great way to harness an FAC. I love that. Dan, I just realized you and we're out of time, man. Like this is great insights about operational excellence, getting the right leadership team in place. How do you leverage an FAC effectively? Also, setting yourself up with your onboarding flow to make sure that people are getting onboarded and learning from that, iterating quickly. I just think you dumped a lot of great wisdom on us today, Dan. Really appreciate that.
Well, appreciate it. It was great, great too. And I lost track of time. I really appreciate your way of your questions because they were like a lot of people that get on, they ask like the same kind of how'd you start the business, the story. This is great because it really covered more like the realities of of being a franchisor, and I really appreciate having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Dan. I'll see you soon, it sounds like, and thanks for being a guest today.
Yeah, see you soon.